Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of our review video session. This is where a bunch of people interested in street epistemology get together to talk about a video that we've watched or that we're watching together and giving our thoughts on it in the context of our favorite subject, street epistemology. We have Reid here with Cordial Curiosity. Hello, Reid.
Hey, Anthony. What's up?
Not much. You doing good?
Good, good.
Good to see you. We've got Mark here from Being Reasonable. What's up, Mark?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you guys again.
And then, of course, we have Dali, Juggling Lessons.
Hello. Having fun practice today.
Man, it's been a busy SE morning. We had one of our board meetings for the nonprofit today. But I'm here just as Anthony, as an SE practitioner and somebody who's interested in atheism. And I stumbled across this video of the Four Horsemen that was recorded in, get this, September 30th of 2007 with Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, and Christopher Hitchens. They're not seated in that order, but they're all there. And I was listening to it and thinking, man, it's so interesting to hear these prominent contributors to the atheist community, the atheist movement, but through the lens of everything that has happened since then, namely street epistemology and other things that have happened. And I thought it could be interesting to play segments of this video and then have us pause it and talk about it. And I went through it initially. We're not going to play the whole thing. This is an hour-long video, and this is the first half of the two-part series. But feel free, guys, to pause. Raise your hand if you want to stop it. But what I'd like to do is play the first 7 minutes and 51 seconds, where they talk about accusations of being rude and strident and shrill. These are things that we try to avoid when we're doing street epistemology. So it's interesting to hear these folks talk about the resistance that they're getting. We'll skip around a little bit, and then there's like 3 minutes here, 3 minutes here. We jump around a little bit more. But hang in there with us. I think it could be a fun ride just to compare what these folks were seeing in the community and the reactions that they were seeing to their work, compared to the things that we're seeing from theists and so forth, and even atheists, to the work that we're doing in street epistemology. So if there's any, unless you guys want to say anything, I think we can get right to it.
Oh, sounds good.
Okay, let's play that
It's
video.
been a year since I've seen this, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I was going to say, I probably watched this 3 or 4 years ago, maybe even longer. And then it just happened to come up on my timeline again. I thought this could be fun to go through.
Yeah, all right, here we go.
One of the things we've all met is the accusation that we are strident or arrogant or vitriolic or shrill. What do we think about that?
Yeah, well, I'm amused by it because I went out of my way in my book to address reasonable religious people, and I test flew the draft with groups of students who were deeply religious. And indeed, the first draft incurred some real anger. And so I made adjustments. And it didn't do any good in the end, because I still got hammered for being rude and aggressive. And I came to realize that it's a no-win situation. It's a mug's game. The religions have contrived to make it impossible to disagree with them critically without being rude.
Without being rude.
They sort of play the hurt feelings card at every opportunity, and you're faced with the choice of, well, am I going to be rude, or am I going to articulate this criticism? Yeah. I mean, am I going to articulate it, or am I just going to button my lip? And
right. Well, that's what it is to trespass a taboo. I think we're all encountering the fact that religion is held off the table of rational criticism in some kind of formal way, even by, we're discovering, our fellow secularists and our fellow atheists. Just leave people to their own superstition, even if it's abject and causing harm, and don't look too closely at it.
Now that was, of course, the point of the title of my book, is there is this spell and we got to break it.
But if the charge of offensiveness in general is to be allowed in public discourse, then without self-pity, I think we should say that we too can be offended and insulted. I mean, I'm not just in disagreement when someone like Tariq Ramadan accepted now at the high tables of Oxford University as a spokesman, says the most he'll demand when it comes to the stoning of women is a moratorium on it. I find that profoundly much more than annoying.
Right. Yeah.
Insulting, not only insulting, but actually threatening.
But you're not offended. This is you don't take any. I don't see you taking things personally. You're alarmed by the liabilities of certain ways of thinking, as in Ramadan's case.
But he would say, or people like him would say, that if I doubt the historicity of the Prophet Muhammad, I've injured them in their deepest feelings.
Right.
Well, I am in fact. I think all people ought to be offended, at least in their deepest integrity, by, say, the religious proposition that without a supernatural celestial dictatorship, we wouldn't know right from wrong. That we only live by.
But are you really offended by that? Doesn't it just seem wrong?
No, I say only, Sam, that if the offensiveness charge is to be allowed in general and arbitrated by the media, then I think we're entitled to claim that much without being self-pitying or representing ourselves as an oppressed minority, which I think is an opposite danger, I would admit. I'd like to add also that that I agree with Daniel that there's no way in which the charge against us can be completely avoided, because what we say does offend the very core of any serious religious person, at any rate. We deny the divinity of Jesus, for example, but many people will be terrifically shocked and possibly hurt. It's just too bad.
I'm fascinated by the contrast between the amount of offense that's taken by religion and the amount of offense that people take against really anything else, like your artistic taste, your taste in music, your taste in art, your politics. You can be not exactly as rude as you like, but you can be far, far more rude about such things. And I'd quite like to try to quantify that, to actually do research about it, actually test people with statements about their favorite football team or their favorite piece of music or something, and see how far you can go before they take offense, compared to, is there anything else apart from, say, how ugly your face is that gives such...
Or your husband's or wife's or girlfriend's face.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I regularly debate with the charitable man called John Donoghue of the Catholic Defense League, and he actually is righteously upset by certain trends in modern art, which tend...
What's up, Reid?
Do
you want to pause it?
Sorry, it's just Christopher Hitchens' bluntness. I love it.
Oh, yeah. I do like Richard Dawkins's like wanting to quantify this somehow scientifically. Like, how can we find that very moment that it crosses over to offense? And I want to get right up in there, or maybe go beyond it. I'm not exactly sure what his goal was, but why would he want? It's kind of interesting that he's viewing the response that people get to challenging beliefs and wanting to quantify it in some way. I think that's pretty cool.
I do find it interesting that when I interview different people, this is kind of a qualitative judgment here, is that if I am interviewing someone whose belief is, let's say, in tarot cards, I in my mind, I don't really have to worry about offending that person as much in my mind. And I could be wrong about that, but certain other beliefs, I have to be more mindful of that. I don't know if you say the same thing.
No, but did you notice that they were talking about like the response that you might get is similar to insulting them, the way that they look, or the way that one of their partners looks or something. So they're getting it that it's an affront to the person's identity, I think. Like, I think they're drawing that distinction, but you don't usually get that with things like karma or tarot card reading. Like, I don't feel like I'm walking on eggshells when I'm exploring a karmic belief, as opposed to somebody's belief that there's a deity.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
By the way, Reid, I don't see the timestamps when it's playing, so you'll have to monitor that and stop that. Okay.
Yeah, I have to put my cursor over it just to see. I'll check in on that.
Okay, cool.
Periodically.
Or the elephant down on the Virgin. And indeed, I think it's quite important that we share with Sophocles and other pre-monotheists a revulsion to desecration or to profanity. That we don't want to see churches desecrated or
no, indeed not.
Religious icons trashed and so forth. Yes. We share an admiration for at least some of the aesthetic achievements of religion.
All right. I think this whole notion of, I think our criticism is actually more barbed than that, in the sense that we're not we are offending people, but we're also telling them that they're wrong to be offended. I mean, this is
Yes, yeah.
physicists aren't
Yeah.
offended when their view of physics is disproved or challenged. I mean, this is just not the way rational minds operate when they're really trying to get at what's true in the world. And religions purport to be representing reality, and yet there's this peevish and tribal and ultimately dangerous reflexive response to having these ideas challenged. I think we're pointing to the total liability of that.
Well, and two, there's no polite way to say to somebody,
you've wasted your life.
Do you realize you've wasted your life? Do you realize that you've just devoted all your efforts and all your goods to the glorification of something which is just a myth? Or have you ever considered even if you say, have you even considered the possibility that maybe you've wasted your life on this? There's no inoffensive way of saying that, but we do have to say it because they should jolly well consider it.
Yes, Mark.
So it's an interesting thing that Daniel Dennett said. I would probably disagree with that some, and because I think there are ways to talk about that sort of thing. And for example, so like a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I watched the movie Cats, and it's just this terrible movie. I mean, just horrible. And but we sat down, we started watching it, and we got like 30% through, but we kept watching it because we knew how bad it was, but we kept watching it because we started watching it. And it's just the whole idea of the sunk cost fallacy that once you're down this road, well, I'm down this road already. How can I change now? And if I do change, I'm admitting to myself that everything I've done up to this point has just been wrong and incorrect. And I think that's that could be reframed, definitely, that because we've all had those experiences. It's nothing unusual about going down a road and realizing it's the wrong road and changing that road.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
Anything, Dali? You want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm all in favor of doxastic openness. We have to model that. That's what we're asking people to do. So we better make sure we're doing it. We need to be very open ourselves. So yeah, sunk cost fallacy. I recognize it in myself and I try not to.
Yeah, I think it's probably important to keep in mind that, as when we're having conversations with people who have these deeply held beliefs, that there is a cost, that goes along with questioning it and getting rid of it. It's probably one of the reasons why they hold on to it or they're resistant to changing their mind is because of that cost. So probably acknowledging it and at the very least becoming aware that it could be a painful process for people to start questioning these views. I think it's really important, but it's probably something that we all, like you were saying, Mark, I think it's something that we all encounter. It's not just limited to theism, but we're maybe particularly sensitive to it when it's a theistic belief than some other belief.
Yep. Another minute or so.
I'm finding that other kinds of beliefs like conspiracy theory beliefs or political radical religious kind of beliefs. What am I saying? The kind of political radical beliefs that are idealistic and seem to have the same trappings that religion tends to, I think those are also held in the same I'm offended that you don't accept my definition for a word or things like that. I think they act a lot like religion. Conspiracy and I'm talking about radical politics on all of the edges, whether you're communist or whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it probably doesn't even matter the belief, just as long as the person thinks that it's part of who they are, they see they see it as an affront to them.
Yeah. Radical idealists take offense very easy.
Yeah. And how much they see it as a failure on them if somehow what they believed is incorrect. And it can be reframed in the sense that recognizing a false belief is actually a strength, it's a positive thing.
About one more minute here of this section.
Yeah.
Same as we do about our own lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Dan Barker's making a collection of clergymen who've lost their faith, but don't dare say so because it's their only living. It's the only thing they know what to do.
I've heard from one of them at least.
Have you?
Yeah.
Yes.
I used to have this when I was younger in arguments with members of the Communist Party. They sort of knew that it was all up with the Soviet Union. Many of them had suffered a lot and sacrificed a great deal and struggled, manfully to keep what they thought was the great ideal alive. Their mainspring had broken, but they couldn't give it up because it would involve a similar concession.
Right.
But that certainly, if anyone said to me, "How could you say that to them about the Soviet Union? Didn't you know you were going to really make them cry and hurt their feelings?" I said, "Don't be ridiculous. Don't be absurd." But it's. I find it, in many cases, almost an exactly analogous argument.
When people tell me I'm being rude and vicious and terribly aggressive in a way that I should, I say, if I were saying these things about the pharmaceutical industry or the oil interests, would it be rude? Would it be off limits? No.
Of course it wouldn't.
Right. Well, I want religion to be treated just the way we treat the pharmaceuticals and the oil industry. I'm not against pharmaceutical companies. I'm against some of the things they do, but I just want to put religions on the same page with them.
Including denying them tax exemption.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, or in the English case, state subsidy.
I'm curious how religion acquired this charmed status that it has compared to any of these other things. I mean, somehow we've all bought into it, whether we're religious or not.
I think that's about it.
Yeah, that's good. So it's interesting that that Dennett was saying, I want them to think of it this way. Like, yeah, it would be nice if they did, if they put their cherished beliefs on the same footing as something that they weren't all that invested in, but we are really invested in certain beliefs. And that might explain why they rubbed a lot of theists the wrong way, perhaps. I think that's what they're getting here. It's they said at the very start, it's impossible to disagree with somebody without being rude. I wouldn't say that. I think I could disagree with somebody and be very polite about it and get my point across and afford them the time to explain their position, and hopefully they would afford me the time to explain mine. So it kind of, were they just not aware that at that time, this was 2007, we may not, I don't know, but were we just not aware that we held certain beliefs to different personal standards, and that's why we were offended in some of them and not others? What do you think?
I'm not sure that, like, I don't know. I didn't know Hitch personally, but I'm not sure that he cared, right? I think I don't know.
It makes you wonder, like, were they just thinking, listen, I dealt with it. I overcame it. I'm surrounded by lots of people who overcome it and don't believe these childish things anymore. What's wrong with you? I think maybe that was sort of the mindset, like, why aren't you catching up and getting on board with this? Why are you being held back or holding yourself back?
I'm blind from context. I can't. 2007 and 8 was when I lost my faith, so I can't say what I wasn't looking at it from that place then. I wouldn't know. Before the show, Mark, you were wondering, like, what was, or I don't forget who it was. Somebody was wondering, what was Boghossian doing at this time? He may have been, like, in the prisons doing surveys with prisoners, or maybe this might have even been prior to that, because I don't even think he started that until like 2010. I don't think a lot of people were realizing, what we always talk about in SE is like that backfire effect, that resistance to even entertain an idea that you're wrong if it's part of your identity. Yeah. So that probably explains a lot of the frustration that they probably encountered, I think. Yeah. Okay. SE is only half as old as this video. There you go. Okay, so we want to skip to the. Oh, by the way, anyone could just go and watch this. We'll put a link to the video. But if you skip to the 14-minute and 59-second mark, Reid, we'll play this for about 3 minutes and 42 seconds. This is about doubt, critical thinking, and the nobility of faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got that all lined up here. I just wanted to quote one section from Kindly Inquisitors about offense, because I would think they were talking about offense a lot in that last section. And this is one of my favorite quotes from the whole book. I hope to show that people who are hurt by words are morally entitled to nothing whatsoever by way of compensation. What is the right answer to the person who demands something because he is offended? Just this, too bad, but you'll live. I love that. Anyway, we'll keep going.
Well, I have one question for Dali. Before you said you were a theist around this time, and watching that last clip, how do you think you would have taken that in when watching those four guys?
Exactly at that time. It was in 2007. I was doing a big study in English and Hebrew, and I got to Deuteronomy 4.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the thing that I can say broke my faith. That Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers were very tough, but Deuteronomy 4 just killed it. So by that point, I would have been in favor of, yeah, you're probably right. I should this, I should that. And I was very young in doing it. So my critical thinking sucked.
Would you have been offended watching the video? Would that have turned you off, or
no?
Okay.
No, it wouldn't have offended me even prior, because I had nice thought terminating cliches of they're just misled. They just don't understand. They this, they that. They're the group that can't, the whatever. So I had a whole stack of thought terminating cliches that would keep me from even considering that their position is worthy of anything but pity because they didn't understand.
Gotcha.
All right, another 2 minutes here or so.
Knowing what it is to doubt.
And I don't think many of them ever let themselves contemplate the question, which I think scientists ask themselves all the time: what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
What if I'm wrong? I mean, it's just not part of their repertoire.
Actually, would you mind if I disagree with you about that? I mean, a lot of talk that makes religious people hard to, not hard to beat, but hard to argue with, is precisely that they'll say they're in a permanent crisis of faith. There is indeed a prayer, Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. Graham Greene says the great thing about being a Catholic was that it was a challenge to his unbelief. A lot of people live by keeping two sets of books. In fact, it's my impression.
There is that.
It's my impression that a majority of the people I know who call themselves believers or people of faith do that all the time. I wouldn't say it was schizophrenia. That would be rude. But they're quite aware of the implausibility of what they say. They don't act on it when they go to the doctor or when they travel or anything of this kind.
Right.
But in some sense, they couldn't be without it. But they're quite respectful of the idea of doubt. In fact, they try and build it in when they can.
Well, that's interesting then. And so when they are reciting the creed with its total apparent conviction, is this kind of mantra which is forcing themselves to overcome doubt by saying, yes, I do believe, I do believe, I do believe, because really I don't.
And of course, like the others, like the secular counterparts, they're glad other people believe it. It's an affirmation they wouldn't want other people not to be making.
Well, also there's this curious bootstrapping move, which I tried to point out in this recent On Faith piece. This idea that you start with the premise that belief without evidence is especially noble. I mean, this is the doctrine of faith. This is the parable of doubting Thomas. And so you start with that, and then you add this notion, which has come to me through various debates, that the fact that people can believe without evidence is itself a subtle form of evidence. I mean, we're kind of wired to, actually, Francis Collins, you mentioned, brings this up in his book, where the fact that we have this intuition of God is itself some subtle form of evidence. And it's a kind of kindling phenomenon where once you say it's good to start without evidence, the fact that you can is a subtle form of evidence, and then the demand for any more evidence is itself a kind of corruption of the intellect or a temptation or something to be guarded against. And you get a kind of perpetual motion machine of self-deception where you can get this thing up and running.
But they like the idea that it can't be demonstrated, because then there'd be nothing to be faithful about.
Right.
If everyone had seen the resurrection, and we all knew that we'd been saved by it, then we would be living in an unalterable system of belief, and it would have to be policed.
Right. Well,
and it would actually be, those of us who don't believe in it are very glad it's not true, because we think it would be horrible. Those who do believe it don't want it to be absolutely proven so there can't be any doubt about it, because then there's no There's no wrestling with the
Somebody-
conscience. There are no dark nights of the soul.
It was a review of one of our books. I don't remember which, but it was exactly that point that just
I think you cut it there.
crass.
You had another 30 seconds or so, but
Oh, okay. Finish the 30. Sorry.
Expectation on the part of atheists that there should be total evidence for this. I mean, there'd be much less magic. You know, if everyone was compelled to believe by too much evidence. Actually, this is Francis Collins. I'm sorry. This is
Well,
Francis
a
Collins.
friend of mine, Canon Fenton of Oxford, actually, said that if the church validated the Holy Shroud of Turin, he personally would leave the ranks, because if they were doing things like that, he didn't want any part of it.
Right.
That's a good point to stop. Okay. Evidence, faith, doubt. There were even some hints of maybe the presuppositionalist apologetic. I don't know if you caught that there. Thoughts?
I think what atheist activism and street epistemology have done since 2007 has turned this idea of belief without evidence as something embarrassing even for Christians, even for apologetics to put forward. And I think that's progress.
That's huge progress.
Yeah. They seem to be saying that it's noble to believe without evidence, and you can take it on faith. I don't see a lot of people, at least prominent apologists, talking about faith, that it's noble to believe without evidence. It seems like, in the interim, maybe. I mean, I wasn't really paying much attention to the atheist scene back in 2007 to 2012. I wasn't even aware of it. I was probably like, I wasn't like a theist like Dali at the time, but I was just sort of like an agnostic, and yeah, what's this atheism stuff? And I had other stuff going on. But I wonder if the presuppositionalist apologetic, like this was their entry point, like that transition. Seemingly along the way, there's been maybe a transition to recognizing that we really should have evidence. We shouldn't be taking this on faith, but the evidence is kind of lacking. So what else is there? And I think maybe that could have attributed to the rise of precepts.
Potentially, if you can't have faith, then you play by the secular modern rules of evidence and reason that way. But if you don't have good enough evidence, then the last thing you can do is just merely assert it or assume it.
Yep. Christopher talking just there about being very careful not to call it schizophrenia. One of the claims that I examined in SE practice this morning, or in our Europe friendly time, was about speaking of mental illness and being able to speak of religion in the same conversation without offending people. It was how to use the language of mental illness to be specific about it and to not rope in religion with it.
You mean like when someone is experiencing delusions or hallucinations or something like that?
Well, yeah, and the definition of religion fits delusion exactly, except that in the case of religion, it's something commonly held within your society, so it's no longer maladaptive, or I'm not sure what, but for some reason it doesn't qualify as delusion if it's a commonly held religious belief. There's a carve out.
It's not a delusion if everyone believes it.
Right. If enough people believe it's no longer a delusion is the idea. And my interlocutor is working in mental health and is challenged by that, like obvious up in your face. How can you tell the difference between mental illness and delusion, or mental illness and religion in some cases?
I wanted to latch on to something that Dennett said at the very start again. He said something like, theists don't allow themselves to question. But that hasn't been my experience. The theists that I run into when I'm using questions in the Socratic method or street epistemology, whatever you want to call it, that sort of a kindly inquisition, I do see my conversation partner questioning, doubting, thinking about things, and even revising their positions on their claims. So what I'm noticing here, like with the four of these, is that I think that what they're talking about is the product of the resistance that they received from the approach that they used.
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
so I think that their commentary on theism is probably a result of the approach that they use when they encounter those people to challenge their views. Because we today can say, I want to ask you questions that will challenge your view. You may start questioning or doubting your position. Can we explore that? And I notice very willing participants. So it's interesting. I think the approach has a lot to do with this resistance that they're encountering.
And I think when you use an SE approach and you talk to someone who's a deep theist, that it can be clear. It can be clear quite quickly that they've thought about this quite a bit. I mean, you're not just landing this on them. That this is something that they may go to sleep thinking about and waking up thinking about. You can tell that this is something that's gone through their minds quite often. And with an SE approach, you can pull that out. But I think if you're a little bit more direct, I think you can cause a bit of defensiveness, and you would never know that. Yeah.
Right. See, my impression from talking to a whole bunch of theists is that they really haven't given it a lot of thought. Now, they give the conversation that I've had with them a lot of thought, but it doesn't seem that maybe, let's say 80% of the people that I've encountered don't seem to have really given their beliefs much thought than a cursory glance.
And maybe the difference there is that I am maybe talking to more professional religious individuals, and maybe it might be, I don't know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm encountering strangers on the street.
Exactly.
You may be seeking up people because you notice that they have a channel or something. If that's the case, then they likely have given it more thought. Okay, what's the next? I think we're going to skip here to the 18. Oh no, we're going to continue here, but they start talking about circularity of starting a belief with faith.
Okay.
That's two.
I didn't expect when I started off my book tour to be as lucky as I was. I mean, Jerry Falwell died in my first week on the road. That was amazing.
Yes, that was amazing work.
I didn't expect Mother Teresa to come out as an atheist.
Yes.
But reading her letters, which I now have, it's rather interesting. She writes, I can't bring myself to believe any of this. She tells all her confessors, all her superiors, I can't hear a voice. I can't feel a presence, even in the Mass, even in the sacraments. No small thing. They write back to her saying, that's good.
Right.
That's great. You're suffering. It gives you a share in the crucifixion. It makes you part of Calvary. You can't beat an argument like that.
Right.
The less you believe it, the more you're an illustration.
The more
of faith.
you prove it's true.
Yeah.
Yes, and the struggle, the dark night of the soul is the proof in itself.
Yeah.
So we just have to realize that these really are non-overlapping magisteria. We can't hope to argue with a mentality of this kind.
Well,
we can do just what you're doing now, and that is, we can say, look at this interesting bag of tricks that have evolved. Notice that they're circular, that they're self-sustaining, that they don't have any, that they could be about anything, and then you don't argue with them. You simply point out that these are not valid ways of thinking about anything. Because you could use the very same tricks to sustain something which was manifestly fraudulent.
Let's pause it there.
Well, I think that's very important. I mean, they're discussing how you change minds and how you have people self-reflect and analyze their own beliefs, and they're discussing precursors to SE and what could be a useful way to do this and what would likely not be a useful way to do this. And I thought,
but they said we have to point it out, and there's lots of different ways you can point something out. You can state it to be the case, or you can help them discover it on their own by talking in their own language and using questions to evoke it from them. And I think I keep coming back to this, obviously, but I think the SE approach of evoking it from them keeps defenses low, and it lets you reveal the true reasons that's propping up the belief, and then you leave them alone so that they can process it on their own. But I think they're of the point, like, listen, they're observing it, they're noticing this is circular reasoning. This isn't noble. This is the opposite of nobility, taking something on faith without evidence and or even eschewing evidence altogether and just saying, like, I'm just going to accept it. When
But imagine saying that to your interlocutor. That wouldn't get you very far.
But I think that's the
But pretty
approach,
close though.
That's the approach that I think they're advocating for, or they themselves use. We've seen them use it. And
I only have to turn about a third of that sentence inside out to make it into just the right question. The idea that this thing is circular. Do you see this thing as a way to do it? Can you test it? We can do it. We can get right to the thing that he's asserting, asking the questions.
Yeah. It could be fun to see how these individuals interact one-on-one when they're not on the stage with a theist, and see, did they use a more conversational approach where they're asking questions, or were they pointing out their objections to the reasoning that their conversation partner had? I suspect it was probably the latter. Don't know. Okay. Was that the end of it, or was there a little bit more?
I think there's one more minute.
Yeah.
And in fact, what fascinates me is that a lot of the tricks they have their counterparts with con artists. They use the very same forms of non-argument, the very same non sequiturs, and they make, for instance, they make a virtue out of trust. And as soon as you start exhibiting any suspicion of the con man he gets all hurt on you and plays the hurt feelings card and reminds you how wonderful taking it on faith is, and how I mean, there aren't any new tricks. These tricks have evolved over.
And
over
one could add the production of bogus special effects as well, which is one of the things that completely convicts religion of being fraudulent.
Right.
Well, they recognize that the theist is mentioning faith, and they're positioning it as a noble thing. Certainly, the theist thinks of it that way, but I don't think that they just haven't reflected on it. And if you can encourage that kind of reflection, like we try to do in SE, then that's where I think that the progress happens.
Mm-hmm. All right, I skipped forward a bit. Do your next.
2356. I guess this section is about slippery theists. Yes.
There's a slipperiness too, isn't there, about one way of speaking to sophisticated intellectuals and theologians, and another way of speaking to congregations, and above all, children. And I think we've all of us been accused of going after the easy targets of the Jerry Falwells of this world and ignoring the sophisticated professors of theology. And I mean, I don't know what you feel about that, but one of the things I feel is that the sophisticated professors of theology will say one thing to each other and to intellectuals generally, but will say something totally different to a congregation. They'll talk about miracles. They'll talk about.
Well, they won't talk to a congregation.
Well, the archbishops will.
Yes, but when the sophisticated theologians try to talk to the preachers won't have any of it.
Well, that's true.
I mean, you got to realize that sophisticated theology is like stamp collecting. It's a very specialized thing, and only a few people do it.
And a negligible influence.
They take in their own laundry, and they get all excited about some very arcane details, and their own religions pay almost no attention to what they're saying. A little bit of it does, of course, filter in, but it always gets beefed up again for general consumption, because what they say in their writings, at least from my experience, is eye-glazing, mind-twisting, very subtle things which have no particular bearing on life.
Oh, no, I must insist. I must say a good word here for Professor Alistair McGrath, who in his attack on Richard said it's not true, as we've always been told, and most Christians believe, that Tertullian said, credo quae absurdum, I believe it because it's ridiculous. No, it turns out, I've checked this now, though I don't know this from McGrath,
Tertullian.
that in fact Tertullian said the impossibility of it is the thing that makes it the most believable. That's a well distinction, I think, and very useful for training one's mind. Very useful for training one's mind in the fine points. It's the likelihood, in other words, that it could have been made up, is diminished by the incredibility of it. who would try and invent something that was
Yes,
that
it's so off the
unbelievable.
wall.
Well, you make some very good points
that
on
actually
those
is
lines.
that actually
Yeah.
is
That's a good
I
point.
think a debate perfectly well worth having. What I say to these people is this: you're sending your email or your letter to the wrong address. Everyone says, let's not judge religion by its fundamentalists. All right. Take the Church of England. Two of whose senior leaders recently said that the floods in North Yorkshire were the result of homosexual behavior. Not in North Yorkshire, presumably, but probably in London, I think they're thinking. So, but
God's aim is a little
one
off.
of these, the Bishop of Carlisle, is apparently about to be the next Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, this is extraordinary. This is supposed to be the mild and reflective and thoughtful and rather, troubled church, making fanatical pronouncements. Well, I want to hear what Alistair McGrath is going to write to the Bishop of Carlisle, not to me. Is he going to say, my Lord Bishop, do you not realize what a complete idiot you're making of yourself and of our church? Did he do this? If he did it in private, I'm not impressed. He has to say it in public.
The Bishop
Why are
of
they
Carlisle
telling me that
backtracked.
I will judge the church by statements of its bishops? I think I'm allowed to.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What do you think? Do you think that the theists of today, or the sophisticated professors of theology, have a different position internally amongst their own clique, and they present something different to the congregations?
I think this kind of leads to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, is that sometimes I'll have professors of religion on the show. And when I first started doing that, I didn't make that distinction. But when I think maybe that's what I'm talking about. They've really thought about this. And sometimes I'm left wondering, what do you believe? Because I'm not quite clear on that. And it's a different, I think that from my experience I think they seem to be right on target.
Well, in SE, we always try to drive to the reasons and the method. And I always got the suspicion that, you can even just go to church. They talk about what you should believe and what the book says. There's very little about the justifications for the belief and how they determine that it's true. Those are the conversations that seem to get saved for off to the side, when you're private with them, or if you happen to stumble across one in the streets or something. It's not usually what's being presented to the congregation. And maybe that's because of SE being on the scene now, perhaps that's where they need to go. Perhaps the people at the pulpit need to spend more time talking about epistemology and how you can defend this view, because you will start encountering people who will be challenging it, who are not interested in what you believe and the value you get from it, but your reasons and your methods.
Whenever I hear sophisticated theology, I just compare sophisticated theology to modern scientific standards in epistemology of having a hypothesis, having a model, and being able to test the model in the real world, and being able to identify things that would disconfirm your hypothesis. Nothing like that exists in theology. I don't think it deserves the word sophisticated if we have more powerful ways of figuring out reality in science. I just don't, I'm not impressed with the sophistication of what I've seen so far. I could be wrong.
In my experience, a sophisticated theologian is an obscurantist. They talk in very complex language, and it's this layers and layers and layers built on top of each other, where when you run into somebody on the street, they just tell you the basics of why they think that it's true. There's not all this other baggage in there. So when you do encounter somebody who's a professor in theology or an apologist, there's a lot more foliage to kind of get out of the way before you can reveal the foundation to their belief. But here's my question. I was wondering, who are the sophisticated professors of theology today? If church attendance is dwindling and people aren't going and being exposed to this, how are religious people learning about how to defend and justify their views if it's not from a sophisticated theologian? Like, are they reading books? My sense is that a lot of people are just watching YouTube videos or TikTok videos, and they're religious and they're seeing arguments and they're gravitating towards them. Is that your sense too? Or do you think that believers today are encountering a more well thought out theological argument for the position?
I think that the sophisticated, when I think of sophisticated apologists, I'm thinking William Lane Craig, Edward Fesser, Tim and Lydia McGrew. Now, these are people that I mostly am exposed to because Pine Creek's reviewing them, so I'm getting a very biased view. But when I start looking at who are the ones that seem to be respected in the community, and then I actually talk to believers, they've never heard of these people. I get 5 or 10% of Christians who've ever heard of William Lane Craig, and I think he's probably the most famous of these people that and I don't know. My N is bad, but still,
my suspicion is most theists don't even know what an apologetic is or an apologist, let alone a name of one. Like that's not. There's like this narrow niche community of people who are interested in it, and then there's this narrow niche community of atheists who are interested in it as well. But I think your average everyday believer has no idea who those people are or what the best arguments are, and maybe they should, I guess, especially if they're going to start encountering people who are going to be asking them questions. We do want people to give their best argument for their views. We don't want to be knocking down straw men, right? Yeah, I'm getting the sense that like a lot of this is kind of moved online. And you listen to a podcast, you watch a YouTube video. That's usually how people are encountering these defenses for the belief. I don't think maybe it is coming from their pastors at the church or the imam or something, but I suspect that it's probably more from an online presence. Maybe we'll start to see more people getting into apologetics because that's where it's going.
I encourage that.
Yeah. Okay. So this goes on for a little bit more to the 20 minutes. It's basically more of the same. Theist leaders who think one thing but tell their congregation something else. So let's play it to the 29:36.
Okay.
Sorry, 29-minute 30-second mark.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that never mind about the academic theologians, bishops and vicars, who will attack us for taking scriptures or for accusing people of taking scriptures literally. And of course we don't believe the book of Genesis literally. And yet they do preach about what Adam and Eve did as though they did exist, as though there's somehow it's a sort of license to talk about things which they know and anybody of any sophistication knows is fiction. And yet they will treat their congregations, their sheep, as though they did exist, as though they were factual. And a huge number of those congregations actually think they did exist.
Can you imagine any one of these preachers saying, as such a topic is introduced, this is a sort of theoretical fiction. It's not true, but it's a very fine metaphor. No, they're just
they
not
kind of
going,
after the fact imply that that's what they expect you to know.
Yes, but they would never announce it.
Well, there's another point there is that they never admit how they have come to stop taking it literally, because you have all these people criticizing us for our crass literalism, whereas fundamentalists as the fundamentalists, and yet these moderates don't admit how they have come to be moderate. What does moderation consist of? It consists of having lost faith in all of these propositions, or half of them, because of just the hammer blows of science and secular politics.
Of the crass literalism of the critics.
Yeah, religion has lost its mandate on 1,000 questions. And moderates tend to argue that this is somehow a triumph of faith, that faith is somehow enlightening, whereas it's been enlightened from the outside. It has been, it has been intruded upon by
on
science.
that point.
Well, that's why I was kind of surprised with when Bishop Barron, remember we did the review of his video and he was talking about how, what was he saying? Something like, he was giving the impression that religion was kind of on par with art. And I was really shocked to hear him say that, because being raised Catholic myself, it was always presented as like, this is the factual truth of the matter. It's not a subjective interpretation or an opinion. And yet that's what he seemed to be saying. Now, I might be off on that. maybe that wasn't what he was saying. But that was kind of the first time that I thought I saw a religious leader of some prominence publicly saying to people that religion is it a subjective interpretation, and you can kind of make it. Did he go that far? I don't know if he actually went that far to say you can make it what you want, but it seemed like he was kind of edging on that.
I think he was also sort of defining truth and value, saying, yeah, you can have scientific truth and value, but there's just as equal a power in the truth of art or something. But I'm picky on truth myself.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so let's skip to we're actually here about 30 minutes. Yeah. So this for the next two minutes and 24 seconds, they talk about ridicule. And then this will probably be the end of the video. There's another 30 minutes that people that are listening to this can go and watch the rest of it. And then there's a second half of this conversation with these four people that we'll probably get into in a future discussion. But let's listen to them talk about ridicule.
I'm sorry, I don't remember. He's a very senior Anglican cleric in the Diocese of Southwark. I went on the BBC with him. Just entre parenthèses, I'll say, when I'd said, how can you call your congregation a flock? Doesn't that say everything about your religion, that you think they're sheep? He said, well, actually, I used to be a pastor in New Guinea, where there aren't any sheep. Well, of course, there are a lot of places where there are no sheep. Gospel's quite hard to teach as a result. We found out what the most important animal to the locals was, and I remember very well my local bishop rising to ask the Divine One to behold these swine, his new congregation. But this is the man who deliberately does a thing like that, that's as cynical as you could wish, and as adaptive as the day is long. And he says that we who doubt it are as fundamentalists as people who blow up their fellow citizens on the London Underground. It's unconscionable. Thus, I don't really mind being accused of ridiculing or treating with contempt people like that. I just frankly have no choice. I have the faculty of humor, and some of it has an edge to it. I'm not going to repress that for the sake of politeness to people.
Would you think that it would be good to make a distinction between the professionals and the amateurs? I share your impatience with the officials of the churches, the people this is their professional life. It seems to me they know better.
Right.
The congregations don't know better because it's maintained that they should not know better. I do get very anxious about ridiculing the beliefs of the flock because of the way in which they have ceded to their leaders. They've delegated authority to their leaders, and they presume their leaders are going to do it right. So I think in this, who stands up and says the buck stops here? Right. Well, it seems to me it's the preachers themselves, it's the priests, it's the bishops, and we really should hold their feet to the fire. For instance,
Well, first of all, it's so strange to see somebody smoking.
Yeah, especially in hindsight with his condition later developed.
Yeah, very unfortunate.
Right. He died in 2011 or something, I think.
Let's see.
But so I think all of us have been torn from time to time where we don't want to have to sugarcoat stuff. We don't want to, put our kid gloves on, we feel like sometimes. And I think Hitch was sort of arguing, what's the point of doing all that? We know they should be ridiculed. And I think it'd be interesting, if he were alive today, because I think Hitch, had such a creative mind, and he's so just sharp that if you instructed him to do SE, even though that was not his personality style, but if you instructed him to do it, I think he would be terrific at it. But I think he just didn't have the bandwidth for it. What do you think?
I think that's Pine Creek.
What's Pine Creek?
Oh, Hitchens SE.
I think if you took Christopher Hitchens and taught him to do SE, you'd end up with Pine Creek.
Yeah.
I'm very biased in favor of Pine Creek.
Yeah, I like Pine Creek too. That's a good point. Yeah. Of the four, actually, okay. So of the four, I think okay, let me ask you this. Who do you think would be best at SE of those four? You think Hitchens would? I mean, Pine Creek's pretty damn.
Sam Harris.
Sam Harris.
Yeah, Sam Harris.
No, I think Dennett.
Okay.
True.
Now I do have the benefit of watching the second half of this conversation, so I see little glimmers of SE in Dennett, and I've also heard Dennett talk about Rappaport rules publicly.
Yeah,
so
there's a whole section in his book, Brain Pumps, or what is it? Something pumps?
Intuition pumps.
Intuition pumps, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sam Harris, I think, would struggle to hold back his own knowledge of things and wanting to share his expertise. That's the sense that I get. Now that could be you can train yourself from doing that. You can teach yourself to just set that stuff aside. So he's all those folks, anyone's, like I always say, anyone can learn street epistemology. You just have to realize what your strengths are and how they can possibly interfere with your progress of the conversation and learn to tamper those back. But I think if you said, okay, Anthony, which of these four would you like to sit down and teach SE, in an hour to see who could really run with it? I think Dennett would be the one.
Yeah, he's already doing a lot of it. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think after plenty of training, Sam would still be better. Once he learned to shoot all his messengers. But my confidence is low.
I don't know. Yeah, I think I put my money on Dennett for that. What about Dawkins? What's his
He wouldn't be interested. He wouldn't be motivated.
Yeah, he just wouldn't have the tolerance for it, I think.
I think he blurred.
Because there's to do SE well, it has to. You have to be able to curb sometimes your gut reactions. You just have to, and you have to impulse control is a lot of it, and you have to, because how many times you're in a conversation and someone says something that's just not true, and you know it's not true, but you don't say that because that doesn't further the goal of helping someone think critically and change their minds if they need to change their minds. Yeah. But even going into an SE conversation, I've messed that up. I've said things and I'll listen to it oh, why did I say that? That really wasn't SE of me, but I did, and because I just had it. I just had enough,
Also, Dawkins is an educator. He's been educating people on the facts of evolution and other stuff, biology. So I think, and he's, of course, he's getting up there too. So it might be particularly difficult to learn to do something different. It's so cool to sit down with any one of them to teach them a little SE and see how they would do with it. Go out on the street with one of them. Would that be cool?
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
That's a great idea if they'd be willing.
Here's the blurb Dawkins had for a manual for creating atheists. Peter Boghossian's techniques of friendly persuasion are not mine, and maybe I'd be more effective if they were. They are undoubtedly very persuasive and very much needed.
See, that word persuasive always rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm of the business I don't want to persuade anybody to do anything. I want them to reveal how they got to their position. But there's oftentimes SE is equated with persuasion.
Well, I think you are persuading them to do a thing. You're not persuading them to change their faith. You're persuading them to talk it out and critically think about it.
What's the definition of persuasion? Let's go there first.
Okay.
Well,
I'm assuming that persuasion means to get them to do a thing you want them to do, whatever that might be.
Yeah. So the goal's not manipulation. And I think that's sometimes the criticism SE gets.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's anything like that.
Persuasion, the action or fact of persuading somebody. The definition includes the word persuasion in it. This actually came up earlier. I think we actually had a discussion about persuasion earlier, didn't we? Not in this stream, but I think in a different stream. Like, I don't want to persuade anyone to do anything that they don't want to do. I do want to encourage people to be reflective and comfortable and relaxed and open and honest. So I might try to elicit that, but I don't want to persuade them. I definitely don't want to persuade them to my position or persuade them out of theirs. I want them to do that, I guess, do that on their own if they feel it's necessary to do.
Yeah. So maybe persuade them to be willing to do that, to examine their own belief.
Yeah, I guess if I'm persuading anyone to do anything, it would be like just to be open about thinking about your thoughts.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't, most people sort of realize the benefit of taking another look at their views. So it's not a high hurdle.
Good for us then.
No.
Yeah, and also if SE ever turns out to be, 10 years from now, we're looking at these videos that we're doing, would turn out SE wasn't the correct way to go, then I think that we're in a good position because we're trying with with the information we have, and
it's funny you say that, because when I started like literally going out with my camera, I was thinking like, I don't even know what this is and if it's causing harm or benefiting things. And then it seemed like I was getting feedback from people that it was good. But I always, even today, like if the end result of SE, and we actually had a meeting today where we're talking about finally doing a study on SE. Like if we start to realize that this is problematic in some way, it would still be a worthy endeavor. All the videos, all the discussions, all the resources we've created, if that's the end result, it's still valuable. It's moved the ball further down the field in, I think, a positive direction, even though we may have been moving backwards, but we didn't know it at the time. Can I
SE you a second?
Sure.
Well, if that was incorrect, then how could we know that? If we 10 years from now, or how do we know if we're not moving the ball down the field, and and that may be the case. I'm just trying to think it through. I guess if more people were more backfire effects, more people became more rigid in their views after their interviews. Like if you did follow-ups on interviews and people were more into their beliefs than less, or
maybe that, or let's say that there's actually a detriment to being more open and malleable about your confidence. Perhaps that in the end is actually detrimental to society and to humanity, to be sort of less confident, less sure. Like perhaps there really is something to be confident in a position, even though you can't justify it to yourself. It doesn't seem like that would make sense.
You mean maybe something more adaptive of being sure of a belief? You mean, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, like, let's imagine that 99% of the population now is very open and they're malleable on their confidence of every claim that they encounter, every single claim.
Right.
And we're far less certain about everything. Could there be some liabilities with that? That I think would be sort of the indication that we've moved the ball in the wrong direction.
I'm trying to think of how that would work in the real world. Like how
I honestly, I can't see how that could be a liability if people were more open-minded and more willing to consider other views. But maybe it's like if we get so infatuated with belief revision that maybe it could actually distract us from pursuing the truth of the matter. I don't know. I honestly, I don't see
that postmodernism.
What's that?
Is that postmodernism in that we can redefine anything we want and there's no objective truth?
No. I don't think we're just saying anything goes. I'm just saying the pursuit, the investment of time and resources to evaluate every single thing you come across and be open to considering it could actually maybe make us less efficient in how we interact with the reality or something.
Yeah.
But I don't see that. I honestly don't see that happening. Because I think the natural human tendency is to latch onto things and hold it. So as long as we sort of create a little bit of openness, and there's always that human tendency to try to go to certainty, we probably found a really good balance there.
And there's that argument where it's not so much what the belief is, It's the fact that we all have the same belief. And that's what's the good thing is that helps propel society, and we all get along, and we're all, because we all know our place, and
It's
know
a cooperative effort,
right?
right? So maybe we now suddenly have everyone walking around with slightly different. Well, we kind of have that today. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how we would be able to say this was a huge mistake. Go back to what those four guys were doing. That was really the best way to move society forward and figure out what's true and put an end to magical thinking and all this other stuff. But
it's it's a legitimate question. Since we do SE, we need to know if SE is not useful. We need to know how to know that.
we can't know what's not useful about it until we decide collectively, maybe what success is. We can't identify failure until we identify also success. Maybe.
Okay.
Right.
So success is somebody just re-examines their thoughts and beliefs and maybe changes their confidence. That's their.
In my view, this is Anthony's perspective. My perspective of a success would be a cultural shift where the majority of the population is less dogmatically certain about most things. And they're willing to entertain and be open to new evidence that could show that we need to head in a different direction.
Yeah.
It's kind of vague, but hey, I mean, that's my off the cuff attempt at sort of talking about what I think would be a success.
I bet a great natural experiment for this would be a Mars colony and a Mars civilization. So it's like, we would assume the culture on Mars would at least start out with scientists.
We don't need to go to Mars. What if could somebody run some simulations for us, like create populations of people that when presented with new ideas have a little bit more resistance or delay in accepting them or something? Surely there's a programmer out there who could maybe model some of that. Wouldn't that be interesting?
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Run thousands, millions of simulations.
And we could do, if you take like even our thought experiments to their logical conclusions, like if let's just say everyone was just real cynical, like just super cynical about everything they hear, and they're skeptical about information and what does that world look like? I mean, does that mean like, well, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to trust anything you say about that because I don't really
hyper-skepticism.
Yeah, I mean,
we keep getting to pure skepticism, skepticism that says I'm going to disbelieve things as opposed to I'm going to doubt things. And that's an overshoot. It's a huge overshoot.
Right. Right.
Got a few comments here. Here's one from Nathan.
Oh, there's Nathan. Somebody was asking, where's Nathan? Well, there he is. He's in the chat.
Saving people from embarrassment with golden bridges is essential for belief revision when admittedly deeply held beliefs are attached more to someone's identity than to the correct understanding. Yeah.
Saving people from embarrassment.
I mean, giving them an out of how.
Yeah. Or just, letting them know it's okay to be wrong.
Yeah.
I was wrong on a lot of different things. I used to believe what you used to believe, and now I have this different, it was a painful process. Pointing out that other people change their minds. Likely they've changed their minds in the past. Yeah. How do individual conversations change a cultural shift? There's a fallacy in there, says Robert Hamilton.
How do individual change?
Could you put that back up on the screen? Because it seems like he's implying
just because you change.
We're swatting at flies by approaching SE the way that we're doing currently. That's kind of what I'm getting. Like, one-on-one conversations is not the way to do it. That's the sense that I'm getting from Robert. We got to get Robert on one of these hangouts one of these times. This is, by the way, this video review thing is kind of open to the community. If you've been fairly interested in SE and you can join in a very professional, I guess in the spirit of these discussions, we'd love to have you join. So Robert, please consider it for next time. What do you think he's saying here, though? That this is futile, doing what we're doing?
Yeah. Can you explain more, Robert?
Yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit more. What's the fallacy?
I think it's individual versus population. There's a difference there. Maybe he's trying to get at that. We can't judge an individual based on population statistics, and maybe that's what he's trying to talk about. But
Hmm.
I think conversation will eventually, if it scales, influence culture. One person can influence one person, then two,
Yeah.
then four, then exponentially that gets you there.
That's been pretty much our
Publishing is a
philosophy.
hell of a multiplier.
Publishing, well, hell, those videos, like the observing people having conversations. You don't necessarily have to have the individual conversation yourself, but how many times have we been told by people who watch SE videos that it's caused them to take another look at their views? They've changed their position on it. They've changed the way that they interact with other people. So yeah, maybe a one-on-one conversation doesn't have as much weight, but when you can record it and share it, I think it certainly does. That's what
Yeah, I
Mark
think-
is doing on his podcast, right?
I think that's what we're all doing. I think we're all, I mean, that's the motivation is to, I really would like to help and talk with the person I'm talking with, but they're not in my mind really. It's the person on the other end of their iPhone or whatever, listening to the show. And I just
Is that
want them
right?
to think about, I just want them to think about their beliefs. It might be a belief that's similar to what we're talking about. It could be something totally different. It doesn't matter. I just want them to think about that. And it'd be nice if the person I'm talking with would change their confidence and to show that it happens. But that's not who I'm thinking of. But
Yeah, I think that individual versus group level distinction is what Robert was talking about.
Yeah. So I think we kind of recognize that in a way that we're probably doing. I mean, at least me, I'm thinking about that I want to really kind of have as many people as possible think about their beliefs, their own beliefs.
Mm-hmm. But it does raise a good question. Like, how do we best integrate SE into the culture?
Yeah.
We've been kind of doing that from the start. Like Peter wrote his books. We've started uploading videos and podcast episodes, and we're doing training sessions, and we're doing this thing here.
Yeah.
We're working on the course. But is that the most efficient way? I don't know of any other way other than maybe getting some high-profile people like an Andrew Wang or a Ben Shapiro. Don't worry about where they stand politically, but somebody popular who can model this type of belief exploration. And then
no one really model. That's part of
No
my.
one's-
I don't
no,
understand.
no one's
is that
modeling
people
it.
don't. It's just a way to talk with people, and I don't understand why people don't do it. It just makes the most.
It's hard though.
On a facie, it just makes the most sense. A way to have a conversation, and it just surprises me that it's so foreign to so many.
Well, just like the four horsemen that we were just talking about, like they are in academia, they're authors, they're educators, they're teachers, they're tellers. And when you're of that mindset of just telling people the facts and here it is, you're going to get that. You're going to get that resistance. I don't know. I don't know how to normalize this type of friendly conversation, other than just keep posting as many examples of us doing it as possible and trying to get more people into it. But maybe there's a shortcut.
Yeah, we're still in the innovators phase of the putting SE into the culture. Like this is the diffusion of innovations model for like any kind of innovation, and straight epistemology is an innovation of conversation. So it's like, how do we get from innovators to early adopters, where it's like more like 13% of the population is going to get there.
It's a good point. And so, I think that I've produced my show as a radio show more than a podcast, hoping that it plays on the radio and people just would come across it, and people who'd never even think about, getting into this kind of content. And so I approached radio stations about it, and, they might not want it because maybe it's not a great show, and that's possible, but it's also, I get the feedback that this is just a bridge too far, that it's going to turn off our listeners, that this is, we're going to upset people. And my response is like, are you not listening to what I'm doing? Because that's not what I'm doing. I'm not sitting there just challenging people's beliefs just for the sake of doing that. But there's a hurdle there that people are just not understanding what the process is. And I don't know how to get beyond that.
Maybe it would help if, I guess, explained what it is you're attempting. You probably do that already. Like you sort of explain why I'm talking to people in this way and letting certain things pass. That might actually help. But, you know, maybe it's good, like that chart that you were showing, Reid. Like perhaps it's good that we're still in the innovators phase, because like to the earlier question from Mark, what would we have to encounter to learn that this wasn't effective or it was actually problematic in some way? Maybe we can kind of work that out during this innovation phase and get some of those basic things out of the way before we start popularizing it and working into the culture. Like perhaps the fact that we're struggling getting this into the mainstream is actually beneficial, because we can start building the infrastructure and working out all the kinks. Would we really want SE to become popular as it was 7 years ago or today?
Yeah.
My guess is today.
But what do you think the what do you think the primary obstacle is to that?
I think there's an entertainment value to argumentation. Like we're drawn to conflict as humans.
Yeah.
We like conflict. It catches our attention.
So we're just too milquetoast to.
I'm not sure. It may just be evolutionary that, you know, our time is limited. We recognize that that's the case, and we'd rather just watch people argue and battle it out rather than make progress. That's my sense, but I don't know. We have any more questions from the audience? There's one good. Have you considered that some people simply don't care? Okay, let's look at this one. Have you considered that some people simply don't care if SE eventually could lead them to doubt? They're willfully using poor epistemology.
If you consider that people simply don't care.
I'm not sure what that's connected to.
Yeah.
Willfully using poor epistemology.
They
They
it's
don't
all
care.
locked in. If somebody doesn't want to, we're not going to do anything other than point and say, you're welcome to come here. And that's it. There's no push.
So the sense that people have their epistemology and they're fine with it and it works fine for them. So why should they care?
Yeah.
Can't do anything about that.
Well, now, and if they actually honestly ask me that question, I have a list. Here's reasons why you should care about having a good epistemology. Sure, I can answer to that. Here are the benefits of knowing what's real and what's right.
Let's hear them.
Oh, right now, really?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think.
I'm happy to do it. That's probably a 10 or 15 minute talk.
Yeah.
Because now I'm going to have to go on and qualify a whole bunch of things of like the common Muslim idea of. I mean, it's a common apologetic idea. I hear it from Muslims more, that a false thing can do you a good thing. A false thing can still be beneficial.
Right.
Yeah.
A false belief is still useful. And I have to talk to that as well for a while.
Yeah, perhaps the cost of belief revision is just too high to entertain it, and that's actually the resistance that we're getting. It's like, you atheists don't have your shit figured out yet. You have no resources. There's no institutions to catch me when I'm falling. Why would I even want to entertain asking myself these questions? You need to get that in place first. You got to build that safety net first before I'll even
That's a good point.
allow this to infiltrate the culture to the level that I think we probably want to get to.
Yeah, if I revise my beliefs, I'd have to change my friends. I'd have to change, how I talk with my family. I might have to change my family. I mean, that's probably taking things to really far, but that might be things that cross people's minds.
When I lost my faith, I lost 90% of my social life.
Yeah.
I got it all back.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's costs. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to wrap it up there? I thought that was. I thought we ended strong. That was great. Okay, so if there's anybody watching who has a video on street epistemology, maybe you have a favorite conversation that one of us have done, either it's Mark or Dali or Reid or myself or somebody else completely, or maybe you've even had a conversation where you thought you were doing SE and you want some feedback, go ahead and join. What's the best place to go? Maybe the SE Discord server, tag one of us, let us know that you have a video. Oh, there's a channel called SE Video and Links in the SE Discord server. That'd probably be a good place to put your video. Maybe tag one of us. We'll take a look at it and see if that's worth breaking down. And then maybe we'll pull up that second half of this discussion with the Four Horsemen and we'll hear them talk about, because I think they get into to tactics or like techniques for talking with people and changing their minds and that type of thing. And it might be interesting to hear what they were recommending back in 2007.
Yeah.
I look forward to that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you guys want to give your channels real quick? I'll start. Then I'll mention the name of the person who can go next. And when we just continue, that'll probably be easier. So you can just find me on social media. Just search for my name on any platform. Tag me if you have any questions, or you want me to take a look at something that you're doing, or you think that you have some value to add to the SE community. Please reach out and hit me up. Reid?
Yep. I have a channel, Cordial Curiosity, on any kind of social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and hopefully I'll have some more stuff on my YouTube channel soon. Dali?
Oops. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Juggling Lessons, and you could find my YouTube channel is Juggling Lessons. My username on Discord is Juggling Lessons, and probably the best place if you want to interact with me is come to the Street Epistemology Discord, where I run a lot of practice sessions and also do tutoring and that kind of thing. SE, go SE.
My name is Mark, and I have a podcast called Being Reasonable. It's a podcast radio show where I talk with one or maybe two people for an hour and to see where we lead to as far as the individual belief that that person presents.
Okay, wonderful. All right, everyone, thanks for joining in. So we'll see you next time.
See you guys.